Okay, well, my clock says 11 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, so I will start. I don't know where you are all located, but thank you very much for coming today. Just introduce myself first. My name is Robert Piddocke. I am a search technologist that has been working with search for a little over a decade now. Most recently, maybe the last 7 years, with SharePoint Search specifically. I'm the author or co-author of Pro SharePoint 2010 Search, which I'm extremely proud of, and working with Microsoft Fast Search Server for SharePoint, also an excellent book on some more technical stuff. I have one of my co-authors with me online here today, Josh Noble, who helped me with the Pro SharePoint 2010 Search, another expert in the area. So if you have questions during this presentation, please feel free to ask them at any time, either in the chat of WebEx or in the Q&A section. Okay, so if you want to contact me, my contact information is there, and also at the end of the presentation. So great, if that's okay with everyone, I'll proceed. Why the basics? This presentation is about nailing the basics in search, and why do we want to know about the basics? Basically, for me, it's because every day I deal with customers who are trying to work with extremely complicated technology to really satisfy a very simple need for their users. And us being technologists and working with search for a long time, we start building very complicated things. And the technology becomes very, very complicated for really what is quite a simple task. And we get this disconnect between the technology that we're delivering and what our users are actually expecting or hoping to get. So what I hope to show you today is just some of the most simple things that you need to do to get the basics down in search. So how do we understand search? What does search do for us in an environment like SharePoint? Well, basically, it's just helping people to have an alternative way to get to some information, sort of a back door to get to the information that they need day to day to do the job. And when I deal with my customers, who are actually the companies and the people, the technologists who are trying to implement this for their customers, who are their companies' information workers, there's a bit of a disconnect. And I ask them, what do you want? And they tell me, we want sorting, we want refining, we want all sorts of different kinds of advanced search functionality, without actually understanding that what their users really want is just to do their job faster. So why do users search? Well, in the first section here, users search because either they're lost and they can't find the information that they want by the normal navigation, or they're lazy. They don't want to actually click through 30 clicks on all sorts of lists in SharePoint to get what they want. So the search is an easy and very direct way to get to the information that they need. What happens is that once they search, they get a result list. And hopefully that result list is going to give them what they want. And a perfect search engine is one that for any given query, the top result is what the person is looking for. But often those search results are just more complicated, and they just lead people to frustration instead of satisfaction. Now the final step is if they see that document that they want, they're going to open it, get the information out of it, and finish their job. A very typical scenario that I see all the time is that an information worker is given a specific task. I need to build this document or make this information or action this job based on a piece of information. And I don't know where that information is because our organization is not well, or we just have a large amount of information. So what do we do to make this whole process perfect? Well, they are the basics. And the problem with search is that it gets convoluted when we get beyond the basics. So nailing these basics is going to help 90% of all of our users. The first basic is content. How do you find that information if you don't have it available? And maybe more importantly, if you don't have it indexed or available in the search. So first thing I'm going to address is some important things about content, how to get content, and what content you should put in SharePoint Search Index. The next is presentation. The next basic thing is the presentation, user experience. What do our users feel, and how do they get to the documents with the user experience that we're giving them. And the final thing is management. What are we doing to make sure that this happens, this success happens on an ongoing basis? And these are really the baby steps to getting search working. So first of all, content. We need to make the right content visible. And I mean, that seems pretty obvious, but people have a lot of information in their organization, and information in organization is growing exponentially. So people have a lot of options of information that they want to put in the organization or put in the search engine or into the SharePoint. But on the other hand, very seldom is the information the correct information. Maybe the information isn't up to date, or the information is flooded with things that are not relevant, which buries the relevant information. So the really important thing about content is that we have all the content that we should have and no more. Another important thing is using and leveraging metadata. There's an old computer adage of garbage in, garbage out, and search engines are, there's nothing more affected by this giggle than search engines. If you feed a search engine junk, people are going to get junk out of it, and that's going to lead to their dissatisfaction. No search engine has a great enough algorithm to be able to sort through all of the junk that people have out there. So a way to enrich the good content is adding properties to it, custom properties. A lot of people are embracing properties, they're embracing taxonomies with the managed metadata service in SharePoint, but we really need to make sure that search also can leverage that metadata in a useful way. Another thing to realize about content is that search is for more than just documents. We don't need to just find Word documents. We can also find people, which is an important part of the dynamic social networking within an organization. And allowing people to find people within search can really help them to complete their jobs. Because if I can't find the document, maybe I can find the person who made the document or might know something about that. There's also other things like web content and images that can be put into search and have it made useful. Again, though, we don't want to put just garbage into the search engine for the sake of having garbage. So we need to do some thinking about that. And the final thing about the content is try to avoid guesswork. And this isn't really just about content. This is about the entire search experience. Guessing about what our users want is the #1 mistake I see with my customers who are the technologists implementing search, is that they guess what they think their users are going to want. Or maybe they listen to one user out of 1,000 who is very opinionated and wants something very, very technical and very complicated, when the other 999 would really just like to be able to do a simple search and find information. So avoid the guesswork, get out there and ask what people want and listen to what they're saying in the search engine. I'll show you how to do that a bit later. So the first thing I want to do is I want to show you in a live environment how to set up a content source. It's very simple. It's a basic, but that's why we're here, is to nail those basics. So I'll jump over now to my environment and show you my search service application. Let's really start at Central Admin, because that will show you the steps that we need to go in order to get to doing this. So in Central Admin, we have the Managed Service Applications page, and this is all the different service applications, and search is one of those service applications. Search is a more complicated service than many of them, but it's a service application nonetheless. So we've got the search service application here, and we can go into it. After we're in there, we can actually add a content source, which is really a place that the crawler, the search engine, is going to go out and collect the information. And it's really simple to do. We just click New Content Source. We choose what kind of content source it is, and this is important because this is a SharePoint site. We use SharePoint sites. It's just a website that is maybe not made by SharePoint. We use websites. If it's a file share, we use file shares, public folders. Line of business data is more complicated, and even custom repository is more complicated. But these three are probably the ones that are the most obvious in your organization. File shares is usually a big one because file shares are traditionally a place where people have stored a lot of content. You type in the path for that file share. If you've made a share, you should be able to test it from the server, something to this effect, and be able to index that. One issue with indexing other content like this is that often that the user that you've set up as your SharePoint default crawler account doesn't have access to that content. So there are two ways to go around that. One is to actually give that user access, which is the best way to do it if it's within the same domain. The other way is to make a crawl rule on that content source. So we can actually tell the crawler, whenever you go to this specific place, I want you to include all the content from that source and use a different content access account. So we're actually going to that other repository and passing a different user account. So getting that content is very important. So make sure that you've got all of the content that you want to have available to people indexed by the search engine. And you can actually make separate content sources and then control the crawler separately on them. So if this content is static, you only need to ever crawl it once. You don't need to keep doing incremental crawls on content that is never updating. But having it in there, if it's important, is valuable. Please do not index all sorts of old content just because it's there. Index it because it's important. Okay, jump back to my presentation. One other thing that people often ask about, I'm not going to go into it now, is why I can't search for PDF files. And it's possible with SharePoint 2010 quite easily to index PDF files and search in them, but you need some third-party help with that. You need to have an iFilter. Adobe's is usually okay. If that doesn't work, there are some other vendors like Foxit that have one that'll work. And you need to do some steps on your crawl server in order to get that done. I'm not going to go into that, but please follow this link if you want to know more about how to do that. We give some detailed instructions there. So the next part of the basics is presentation, because after we've got the content and we've made it searchable, we want to display it to people. And this is really an interesting place because people can often get overwhelmed by poor presentation or just overly complicated presentation. I was dealing with a customer just the other day who was building a massively complicated advanced search field and actually finding all sorts of like design flaws and bugs in the product that we'd never seen before because no one had ever touched that part of our product before. And my sentiment about that is, who is ever going to use such an advanced feature? Maybe those people are out there, but really when you come to presentation, the basics is to keep it simple. Make search available everywhere. So if you, by default, SharePoint has a search box on every page. Don't turn it off. Leave it there. Let people have that escape hole to get out of a lost situation and get to search. Make search accessible. By accessible, I mean easy to understand. Don't overcrowd it with scopes or refiners and things if you can avoid it. Make it easy to understand, but also useful. And I'll show you some examples of what I mean by that. Build your search for your users, not for one user that's the most complicated, but for the general groups of users. If you need to, you can make separate search centers for more complicated or more technically advanced users and let them have a more advanced experience. But try to keep the simple search for the simple users. Like men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Search engines are from Mars, meaning that they're really complicated, they're really far out there. But your users are they're just from New Jersey. They just want to get the job done. So, presentation. Everybody is asking, can't you just make search work like Google? And the sentiment with that, of course, SharePoint Search is a lot different than Google, and one of the big reasons behind that is that the goals that people have when they search on a global search engine like Google are completely different than the goals of the people that you have when you search within the enterprise. But the sentiment is really that the users want a simple and effective search experience. And that's really what you should be giving them. jump over and show you a little bit about what I mean. The default out-of-the-box search looks like this. And this page, the OSS Search Results.aspx page, is a hard-coded page. You cannot really modify it a lot. It's built there because it has navigation, and it's an easy, effective, simple search. But you're probably going to want more to that. You want to be able to add some scopes. You want to be able to add web parts. You want to develop it in time. So you really can't use this one. I mean, some people do use this at one and to a certain point, and then they transition and say, okay, now I need a more advanced search center. But it's a very simple search experience. The problem is that it doesn't really give great results. So what we want to do is we want to add a basic search center and maybe an enterprise search center, if you're licensed for that, that gives more advanced search. So how do you do that? Well, what we do is, let's go to this page. We just create a new site. If we're on our site, we can just go and create a site with a basic search center template. And what this is going to do is give us a new search center that has some more functionality in it and actually can be modified. If you go to the search tab, we can actually see there's a basic search center here and an enterprise search center. The difference is the enterprise search center supports people search. Basic search center does not. But you can, if you're licensed for the enterprise search center, you can activate it. You need to have the publishing turned on in SharePoint, but I won't go into the details of that. If you have a question about that, come to our site or send me a question. But you can make a search center with the basic search center, call it search, and we call it basic search because I think I already have one called search here, and you hit create, and you should be able to create a new search center from there. Now, that's not quite enough because you have to redirect the users from that OSS search results page to your new basic search center. And if it's going to complete, it takes a minute. Now I've got a simple search center. But if I want to redirect the users from my main page to this search results, I'm going to have to go to the search settings. And that is actually under site settings, under site collection administration, which everyone should have access to. You can actually say which result page you want to have for this page. And you can, I don't think I got rid of my page. You can change this URL to the result page of that basic search center that you just created. Oh, here it is. Let me just search for a term I think exists there. So it's almost the same as the OSS search results, but you just notice that the site will have a different path to it. And I can take that and put that into my search settings here. And now the searches will be directed towards this page. We don't want that query on there anymore. Okay, that was the basics for presentation. Aside from that, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but try to keep it simple if you can. Don't put all sorts of bells and whistles. I was actually looking, I don't know if you can, I'll share this, but I was looking at some blogs about some search UIs that people had made, and I saw this search center, and I was like, wow, that's complicated. And maybe for some users, there are probably some business users here, that engineers or something, that find this useful, but for 90% of your users, this is going to be too much. So look at all the scopes that they have up here. It's really too much. Try to keep it simple. Simple is better. Okay. So management. And the last baby step that we want to take is the management of the search. And my message for this is really to put the search in the right hands. You don't generally let your plumber decide where your toilet should go, or your electrician to decide where the lights should go. So, usually that's, at least in my house, it's my wife. You should decide yourself how these things should work, and then just tell the technologists in your organization what you need. And that's really going to help you out a lot. After that, react to what your users are telling you, and then help them grow. grow the search, improve it, make sure things are working, give them tools that they're going to need, and don't give them overly complicated tools that maybe they don't need. And maybe segment. If there are some users or groups of users that want more complicated experience, build a more complicated experience for them, but don't overly confuse the general users just because you can. I'm just going to show you now the simple thing for that, and that's to check the analytics in SharePoint and then make a best bet. I think this is probably one of the key most valuable things about SharePoint search that people are not really leveraging very much. So first of all, there are analytics in SharePoint. We have some site web analytics, and if we go there, we have site collection web analytics. And the site collection web analytics, we can see our search analytics. And we can actually see what the top queries are, what people are searching for. Okay, so there's not enough data in my site, but please try on your own site that there are, that this page will actually tell you what people are finding. And maybe more importantly, what people are searching for and not finding. The failed queries page, which I'm sorry I didn't check before this presentation, and we don't have enough data here to show anything, but this failed queries page really will tell you the keywords that people are looking for, not finding, and then that you can action on. Really great thing to do is directly from here, we can go to our best bets and add a best bet. Now you may ask, what is a best bet? Because it's not really that clear. But a best bet is just basically a promoted result in the search results. So if I'm over here at my search results, instead of just letting the search engine organically give back whatever it may want to, we can put a result right here on the top that shows a link that we think is the best one. Because really, people are smarter than computers still. So you can make a best bet here. So if we go, where was my best bets? Let's just go to the site settings and I'll show you what it is. You can link here under the search keywords page to the best bets. And you can create a new best bet by adding a new keyword. You can, of course, add the best bet here. You can add your keyword and some description of that keyword or add a best bet. You can even have publish start dates and end dates, which is really useful to be able to do that. I know it's effort, but that effort is going to pay back a lot over time. Okay, so I'll just continue. And the last thing is I just want to show you a little bit, just sort of to prove out what I'm saying of what we do at Surfray, because we've been working with search for, like I said, over a decade now, and we've done search enhancements for SharePoint. Thousands of customers have used it, and really what we do is exactly this. We try to make search more accessible. It's really about findability, not clutter. If I can go back to that page that I showed you, in my view, this page is clutter. You really have to think a lot to try to figure out what's going on this page. And that's not what you want to build. If we're building our search, for example, this pharmaceutical search that we have, if we search for something, the results need to be clear. We've got a little bit of complicated stuff going on here. I'm not a big fan of the tag cloud, but some people like it. But really, the idea is that you get a simple inline search results that make sense. And of course, one of the key features of what we do is adding these images so that people can more easily find the document instead of adding all sorts of little buttons and whistles all over the place to try to make sense of this content. You can just see the content immediately and work with it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to wait and see if there are any questions, and I'll share my contact information with you again. So if you do have further questions that you don't feel comfortable asking here, feel free to contact me. If you wanted to get that code for the book, it's in the chat, or you can send me a message and I'll get it to you as well. Thanks very much, everyone, for attending today, and feel free to ask questions in the chat. We'll be around for about 10 more minutes, and we'll answer everything as best we can.
And for anybody that hasn't been watching the chat there, I've been answering a lot of questions and providing some links to different webcasts on various different topics as we're going through. So make sure you open up the chat window there if you missed that as we were going through.
Until a new question shows up, I'll just address a question about document metadata. And this is quite a common question, and actually I think it's a very good question in this context. And that is, can we show other metadata in this page? Because often this information is not great that we get back here. Sometimes these descriptions are missing, sometimes they're not very good. And this is actually a really important thing, and I deal with this in another presentation that I give, but the titles and descriptions of the content are signposts to the content. They're the signposts that lead us on our journey from within search. It's like if we go to an airport and there are no signs anywhere. We know we have to catch a flight, we've gone to the right airport, but there's no signs anywhere, or the signs are completely cryptic. And I don't know what, I know I'm supposed to go to gate C26, but there are no signs saying C26. And that's the situation you're getting with bad titles and descriptions in SharePoint. That's where A, metadata can help us a lot, and B, what the question is how do we get that metadata out here? Now, there are two things that you need to do with SharePoint in order to get that metadata here. And this happens at the web part level. We have presentations on our sites. Please come to our site and have a look. Also on our YouTube channel called Surfray US, I think. We have actually the detailed step-by-step instructions on how to do this. But with out-of-the-box SharePoint, we actually have to edit this core result web part and modify the display properties XSL here. So basically we have to override the location visualization, and there are two areas that we need to modify. One is this fetch properties. We need to first tell the search result web part which properties it needs to fetch from the search index. So we just add that property, whatever it could be here. And then we need to modify the XSLT, which comes up here, to place that property that we've now pulled from the index somewhere in here. And you can see how complicated this is. We do have a demonstration, like I said in the video, of where to do it and how to do it on our website. So go have a look at that, and maybe you can step through it. I think there's also a tech blog that has the exact steps and the code with it too. It's not that hard. It just will take you a few hours to sort of get it right to do that. And that could be a really big value for sure. That's another one of the basic steps, sort of baby steps that we have is getting the right information out so that people can we can lead people to where they want, because maybe this information is not enough. It is actually something that we do in Ontolica as well to make it easier for people. So it's a very important thing to be able to manage what information comes out. If we go to our Ontolica page, we have very simple search tabs menu item that allows you to put that information out instead of having to go in and do XSLT. And that's really what we've been doing all along to try to improve the ease of search and findability just on a simple level. Did we have other questions, Josh?
Yeah, for some reason it's not letting me reply back in chat. In the QA. So I've been trying to answer questions here in chat. Also, hopefully everybody can see them there. If you haven't asked questions and you do have them, please don't hesitate to ask them in chat there. I've also posted, like I said, a couple webcasts that dive into topics like, say, best bets in analytics in far more detail, because that's a 45-minute topic just all on its own. So I haven't received a lot of questions in chat. There's a couple about Office 365 and what you're able to do and some restrictions around that. And my feedback was that I haven't spent a lot of time in Office 365, but my understanding is that most of the front-end search capabilities and that customization is wide open, just like base SharePoint. But the restrictions in Office 365 in regards to search really have to do more with the back end.
Yeah, and that's an important point.
Well?
Yeah, for sure. Like things like the XSLT that I showed you, no problem in Office 365. You can go in and modify this stuff. But one of the things is, let's say I have a custom property in SharePoint, and that is, I want to replace my title with that custom property, or that's really an important custom property. What we need to do is we need to be able to map that crawled property, because SharePoint just doesn't make all the properties or put all the properties that it could possibly find in the index, because that would just bloat our index and it would make it huge and very slow. So what it does is it stores all the crawled properties in a crawled property database, and then allows you to decide which ones you want to be pushed into the index for searching. And that needs to be done on the back end on your central admin. And I don't think that Office 365 supports that, because it's a multi-tenant environment, and you're going to have thousands of people who want to add their own properties to the search index, and then the search index is just not going to work. I would probably wait for Office 365 to the next version to see what happens in that area, but that is a kind of a big restriction around search. It's just, you get really basic functionality with that hosted environment.
Got another question for you, Robert. The question was asked, how does Ontolica search different than fast search?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it's a bit difficult to understand if you talk to Microsoft, because fast search is a separate search engine. It's a very powerful search engine that was built before Microsoft actually acquired it, because it was such a good and powerful search engine. And it's being sold now as a replacement for the out-of-the-box SharePoint search. Its strengths are being able to index huge amounts of data and being able to manipulate that data as it's being indexed, which is really, sometimes that is just an absolute requirement, that I can extract properties from the content of the documents instead of just or having to put them into the properties on the list. What Ontolica does is we modify the user interface of the SharePoint search to make it easier to understand, easier to use. So there's really not much overlap between the two. The confusion comes because with FAST, Microsoft markets things like preview, which is something that we do. Mind you, the preview for FAST that comes for FAST is extremely limited, and it relies on Office web apps. It actually has nothing to do with FAST. It's just bundled with FAST. So one thing that it does do with the UI, which is of the substantial value, is that it will provide deep refiners. So it'll give you refiner counts for the entire search result set, which can be useful as well. But Ontolica is basically sitting on top of the SharePoint search to make it more functional for end users. So we don't replace the search index. We don't add any infrastructure, those kinds of things. But there are, of course, a lot of scenarios where FAST is a requirement, and we deal with that a bit in our book. So if you want to have a look at it, that would help you to figure out what FAST is useful for. But there is really very little overlap between what Ontolica does, findability, and what FAST does, superpower search engine. And really my point with the nailing the basics issue or talk is, because we like to go in every few weeks and do a webinar on super complicated things about search, because it's fun and we really like to get into that, and it's really cool to get technical with stuff. But really what I see day to day is that people just need a little bit better simple search functionality in their organization. That's why I wanted to talk about nailing the basics today.
Robert, got a good question in the chat here. In SharePoint, a lot of times the users are thrown a lot of features that are potentially, unnecessary, or they're provided a lot of options that aren't necessarily going to give them any benefit. So there's a question here about kind of toning back some of those options. If you want to make sure that users are scoping or searching within a particular scope, for example, or something we get into a lot, maybe checking who the user is and then providing them more of a targeted experience instead of just throw them experience with 50 search fields on the page. Or my favorite is deployments that add 50 they have 15 different search refinement categories on one page that don't become very extremely useful.
Yeah, that's just not true for search. That's true for a lot of SharePoint as well. That SharePoint is a platform. It can do a lot of stuff, and when the SharePoint is deployed out of the box, a lot of that functionality is available because they don't know who's going to want all of that different functionality. So really, I think a lot of people are like, okay, I'm going to develop SharePoint. I'm going to advance it to do what I want to do. But in many cases, SharePoint needs to be kind of trimmed back to just satisfy the core requirements of the users. And then after you've done that trimming to sort of fit it into your organization, then expand the areas that are useful and not just throw in all sorts of stuff all over the place. I mean, SharePoint can do a lot of stuff: wikis, blogs, document management, and content collaboration. There are my sites, there's people searches, tons and tons of things. But for many organizations, those things are not useful or a little bit too mature for where those organizations are at right now.